My name is Doris Cangelosi, and I'm 17 years old. People often say that time heals everything, but when the wound is cut by the hands of your own mother, it never really closes. It just scabs over, waiting to be torn open again. When I was 7, my world split in half. My biological father, the only person who made me feel safe, died of leukemia. I remember the hospital room, the beeping machines, the cold fluorescent light that made everything look pale and unreal. I remember him holding my hand, whispering, "Be good, my little one." And then the next morning, he was gone. The day after his funeral, my mother Julia gave me away. No warning, no goodbye, just a suitcase, a small stuffed rabbit, and a lie. She told me that I'd be staying with a kind couple for a few days. I believed her. At 7, you believe your mother's voice, no matter how hollow it sounds. But the days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and soon I was calling those kind strangers Mom and Dad. Julia never came back, not once. My adoptive parents, Elena and Mark Cangelosi, were everything she wasn't. Warm, gentle, honest. They didn't replace what I'd lost. They built something new from what was left. Elena tucked me in every night. Mark taught me how to ride a bike, how to fall without crying, how to get back up. I learned to laugh again, but deep down a part of me stayed frozen in that hospital hallway waiting for a mother who'd already chosen to disappear. I used to have nightmares about her face. Sometimes she was standing in the doorway calling my name. Other times she'd turn away from me, her figure fading into the dark. I'd wake up screaming, thinking she'd left me all over again. For years, I thought I'd done something wrong, that maybe I wasn't lovable enough, not obedient enough, not something enough. No one tells you how to stop blaming yourself for being abandoned. When I was around 10, my adoptive grandparents, kind elderly souls with soft hands that always smelled like lavender soap, told me Julia had made a difficult choice. They said she wanted me to have a better life, that she'd been too young and too sad to take care of me. I nodded, but in my heart I knew there was something darker hiding behind those polite phrases. A mother doesn't abandon her only child because of sadness. By the time I turned 14, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I asked my adoptive mom one night while she was folding laundry, "Why did she give me up?" Elena froze. For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of cotton sheets. Then she sighed, the kind of sigh that carries years of secrets. "Doris," she said softly, "you deserve the truth, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it." I didn't blink. "Tell me." And she did. She told me that when my father got sick, Julia stopped visiting the hospital as often. She'd make excuses, long shifts, exhaustion, headaches. But the truth was worse. Julia had been seeing someone else. Not just anyone, my father's sister, my aunt. My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. But Elena went on explaining that Julia and my aunt had been secretly involved for months before my father passed away. When my grandparents found out, they were horrified. But they kept quiet to protect my father's fragile heart. The betrayal cut through me like a blade. It wasn't just infidelity, it was the collapse of everything sacred. Family, marriage, love. According to Elena, Julia and my aunt had already decided to give me up long before my father's death. Julia claimed she wasn't meant to be a mother, that she wanted freedom. And after he died, she followed through. That night I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to understand how someone could carry a child for 9 months, raise her for 7 years, and still walk away without looking back. In the morning, I looked in the mirror and realized something chilling. I didn't even remember Julia's face clearly anymore, only the outline of her shadow when she shut the door. From that moment on, I stopped wondering why she left. I started wondering how she could ever dare to come back. Little did I know, 10 years later, she would. And she would bring with her a storm that nearly destroyed everything I'd built. I was 14 when the truth started to unravel completely. It began with a simple question: who was she? I asked my adoptive grandparents one afternoon when we were sitting on the porch. The sun was warm, the air still, but their faces suddenly went pale. My grandmother's knitting needles stopped midair. "Doris, she was your mother, but she wasn't the woman she was supposed to be." That night, my adoptive parents told me everything, the version that no one had dared to speak aloud before. Julia hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been deliberate, calculated, cruel. While my father was battling leukemia, fragile, exhausted, still trying to make it to my school recitals, Julia began an affair with his own sister, Amelia. Amelia was the opposite of my mother, bold, impulsive, magnetic. She had always been the rebellious one, the one who moved through life like consequences didn't exist. When my father fell ill, Amelia came to visit often. To help, she said. But help turned into whispers, and whispers turned into something much darker. By the time my father was in and out of the hospital, Julia had already emotionally checked out. Elena told me that my grandparents found out about the affair 6 months before my father passed. They confronted Julia and Amelia, horrified by what they'd done, but the sisters stood their ground. They said they deserved happiness, that my father was going to die anyway, and they couldn't hide forever. When I heard that, I felt something break inside me. Not a scream, not a sob, just a quiet snap. Like a thread I didn't realize had been holding me together, finally gave way. Julia told her parents she didn't want to be a mother anymore. She said she'd never wanted me in the first place, that it was their pressure to do the right thing after getting pregnant that had forced her into marriage. She said she was too young, too trapped, too tired. So while my father was dying, she and Amelia were already planning their future together, a life without him, without me. When my father took his last breath, they didn't even wait for the dust to settle. The day after his funeral, Julia packed my small suitcase, told me I'd be staying somewhere safe, and drove away. The next time she turned back, I wasn't there anymore. Even my adoptive parents, Elena and Mark, had been shocked by how fast it all happened. They told me they hadn't even gone through an agency. It was Julia herself who arranged the adoption privately. She'd been struggling to find anyone willing to take in a 7-year-old child. Most couples wanted babies, not half-grown kids with trauma. But when one of Elena's cousins heard about my situation, they stepped in. Julia didn't cry, didn't hesitate, didn't even ask to visit. She just signed the papers. Like I was a problem being transferred, not a daughter being lost. Hearing all that at 14 made me numb. I remember walking into my room, sitting on the floor and staring at my hands. They were shaking, but I couldn't tell if it was anger or grief. I didn't hate her yet, not then. Hate requires energy, and I was too empty for that. Still in that emptiness, a strange thought began to form. If she could give me away once, what would she do if she ever wanted me back? That question haunted me for years. Even after learning everything, I never expected Julia to return. People like her didn't look back. They built new lives on the ashes of the ones they'd burned. But 10 years later, when her message appeared on my phone, I realized I'd been wrong. The woman who threw me away wasn't done with me yet. It started with a single notification. Hi, Doris. It's your mother. Can we talk? When I first saw the message, my chest went tight, like someone had pressed pause on the air around me. I just stared at the name on my screen, Julia Carter. I hadn't seen those two words together in 10 years. Her message was long, almost poetic, like she'd rehearsed it for days. She said she was sorry, that she'd made mistakes when she was too young to understand love, that she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her. But what struck me most wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't. She never asked how I'd been, never asked about my life, my family, or if I was happy. She just talked about herself. For 3 days, I didn't reply. I told myself I wouldn't. But at night, lying in bed, her words replayed in my mind like an echo I couldn't silence. What did she really want? I remembered her face in flashes, her pale hands, her sharp perfume, the way she used to hum when she brushed my hair. Every detail hurt. Part of me wanted to ignore her forever, but another part, the 7-year-old part, still craved an explanation. So I agreed to meet her. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my grandparents. I didn't want to see that look of worry on their faces or hear the lectures about staying away. I told myself I was just going for closure. We met at a small cafe downtown. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a cup of untouched coffee. When she looked up, my breath caught. Julia hadn't aged the way I expected. Her face was still beautiful, but there was something brittle about her, like porcelain that had been glued back together too many times. Doris, she said softly, standing up with trembling hands, you look so much like your father. The words should have warmed me. Instead, they stung. We sat down. She started talking fast, almost desperate. She told me she'd spent years feeling haunted by what she'd done, that she'd been forced into motherhood, that she'd felt trapped by her parents' expectations. I was young, Doris, she said, voice shaking. I didn't know what I wanted. I was suffocating. And when your father got sick, everything just fell apart. I stared at her. So you decided to start an affair with his sister. The question sliced the air like glass. She froze, her smile faltering. For a long time she didn't answer. Then she sighed. Amelia was the only one who understood me, she whispered. We didn't plan it. It just happened. I loved her. I still do. I wanted to walk out right then, but something kept me in my seat. Maybe it was the way her hands trembled when she reached for her cup, or maybe I just needed to hear how deep her selfishness went. Then her tone changed. She started talking about her life now, her marriage to Amelia, their struggles. They owned a small bakery that wasn't doing well. She said Amelia had been distant lately. Things are hard, Julia admitted, her voice dropping to a whisper. She wants to make peace with our families, especially your grandparents. They haven't spoken to us in 10 years. I frowned. And you reached out to me because... She hesitated, then said it. I was hoping you could help. Maybe talk to them. Convince them to forgive us. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd that my body didn't know what else to do. You want me, I said slowly, to fix the relationships you destroyed. Tears welled up in her eyes. Doris, please. You're the only one they'd listen to. Amelia and I were on the edge of losing everything. She's thinking of leaving. I can't do this without her. I leaned back, my heart thudding with something sharp, disgust, pity, disbelief. For 10 years, I'd imagined what I'd say if I ever saw her again. But this wasn't an apology. It was a request, a transaction disguised as redemption. I realized then that Julia hadn't come to make peace. She'd come to use me. For a few seconds, I couldn't even respond. I just stared at her, this woman who gave birth to me but felt like a stranger wearing my mother's skin. Her eyes were wet, her hands trembling on the edge of the coffee cup, but none of it felt real. It was performance. The kind of crying that comes from someone who's desperate to look broken, not someone who actually is. I leaned forward, my voice low. So after 10 years of silence, you only reached out because you need something from me. Julia flinched. No, Doris, that's not... Yes, it is, I cut in my tone, sharper than I intended. You didn't want to make amends. You just want me to be your bridge back into the family, to fix your mess. Her face crumpled. I am sorry, she whispered. I've regretted everything. But your grandparents won't speak to me. Amelia and I were drowning Doris. I thought maybe what I snapped. That the daughter you abandoned would suddenly save your marriage. For a moment, the whole cafe went quiet. The low hum of background chatter seemed to fade. Julia's tears stopped. Slowly, she set her cup down and looked at me with something new in her eyes. Not guilt, but irritation. I see, she said, her voice hardening. They've turned you against me. I blinked. Excuse me. They've always hated me, she continued, leaning closer. Your grandparents, even your adoptive parents, they painted me as a monster because I wouldn't follow their rules. I was young Doris. I was forced into motherhood, into marriage. I wanted freedom. And you. She paused, her lip trembling. You were part of that prison. The words hit like a slap. For a long time, I just sat there staring at her, trying to comprehend the cruelty of what she'd said so casually. Part of your prison, I repeated quietly. I was a child. You don't understand, she snapped. I was drowning. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but your father was sick. Your grandparents were judging me. Amelia was the only person who understood me. You mean the only person willing to help you betray your family? She glared at me, and for the first time, I saw her mask slip completely. Her expression hardened into something cold and mean, the version of her that probably always existed beneath the surface. You think you're better than me, she hissed. You think those people who adopted you made you perfect. You have no idea what it's like to be me. I don't need to, I said flatly, because I'd never abandon a child and call it freedom. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. You've been brainwashed. They filled your head with lies about me. No, I said softly. You did that all by yourself. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. You want forgiveness. Start by admitting the truth. Until then, don't ever contact me again. Julia's eyes glistened, but I didn't believe a single tear. She was crying because she'd lost control, not because she'd lost me. As I turned to leave, she grabbed my wrist too tightly. You'll understand one day, she said, her voice trembling with fury. When you're older, when you realize what love can do to a person. I pulled my hand free. If that's love, I said, I hope I never feel it. I walked out. The sound of the cafe door closing behind me felt final, like a chapter snapping shut. That night, she sent me a voice message. Her voice was trembling, almost slurred from crying. You'll always be my daughter, she said between sobs. Even if you hate me, even if they all turned you against me, I'll never stop loving you. I deleted it without listening to the rest. For years, I'd wondered how it would feel to meet her again. I thought maybe there'd be pain or closure or some kind of peace. But all I felt was disgust and relief. Relief that I wasn't her anymore. I didn't tell my parents what had happened. Not yet. I needed time to breathe to process the storm she'd just thrown into my life. But I should have known Julia wouldn't stop there. A few days later, she proved just how far she was willing to go. It was a Friday afternoon, the kind of day that felt too ordinary to contain anything sinister. School had just ended, and I was walking home with my earbuds in, humming softly to drown out the noise of my thoughts. For a moment, everything felt normal until a familiar voice sliced through the air. Doris. I froze. When I turned, a silver car was idling at the curb. Julia was behind the wheel. Her hair disheveled, her eyes wide. The sight of her sent a shock through me like touching a wire I didn't know was live. Get in, she called out. Please, we need to talk. I shook my head instantly. No, you shouldn't be here. She opened the car door halfway, tears already glistening on her cheeks. Just 5 minutes. I swear I'm not here to fight. I just need to explain something. I stepped back onto the sidewalk, heart hammering. You had your chance. I don't want to talk to you again. Her expression flickered from pleading to sharp, from fragile to something fierce. You think you can just ignore me, she hissed. After everything I gave up, people nearby were starting to notice. I could feel their stares, the tension crackling between us. I kept my voice steady. Julia, if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police. That's when her tone changed completely. The sweetness melted away, replaced by something venomous. You ungrateful little girl, she spat. You think they love you more than I did. You're blind. They stole you from me. My stomach twisted. Her voice, once soft and trembling in the cafe, was now sharp enough to cut glass. She took a step toward me, and I instinctively moved back. Stop following me, I said firmly. If you show up again, I'll report you. Julia's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You'll regret this, she said quietly. One day you'll see that I'm still your mother. No piece of paper, no fake family can erase that. Then she slammed her car door and sped off, leaving a trail of exhaust and disbelief behind her. By the time I got home, my hands were still shaking. I told my parents everything from the cafe meeting to what had just happened outside school. My mother, Elena, went pale. My father clenched his jaw so hard I could hear his teeth grind. They didn't yell. They didn't scold me for meeting Julia in secret. They just listened and then acted. That night, they called my grandparents, then the local authorities. Together, they filed for a restraining order. The process felt surreal. Sitting in a sterile office describing my own mother's threats, her sudden appearance, her voice. The words felt heavy and strange coming out of my mouth. The police took it seriously. They said Julia's behavior, her stalking, her aggression, crossed a line. But Julia didn't stop. 2 days later, she started posting on social media. At first, it was subtle, cryptic quotes about ungrateful children and false mothers. Then came the real posts. Photos of me from years ago, ones she must have found online. Long captions about how I'd been stolen, how my adoptive parents had manipulated me. She painted herself as the victim, twisting the story so carefully that strangers began commenting words of sympathy. You poor woman, I hope your daughter realizes what she lost. Each post was like a knife, not because of what she said, but because she still knew how to find me. My adoptive father contacted the platform to report her. The police added the harassment to the restraining order file. But Julia kept creating new accounts, new names, new lies. One night around midnight, my phone buzzed with a private message from an unfamiliar username. You can block me 1,000 times, Doris. You'll never erase me. That was the moment the fear truly sank in. I realized this wasn't just about guilt or desperation. It was about control. Julia couldn't handle the idea that I had escaped her, that her daughter had built a life she wasn't part of. When the court finally issued the restraining order, I felt something shift inside me. Relief, anger, sadness. But most of all, finality. Julia was officially barred from contacting me. Yet deep down, I knew people like her didn't obey boundaries. And I was right, because the day she was served the papers, everything she'd been hiding finally came to light, and the truth was even uglier than I'd imagined. The restraining order was granted a week later. The officer who came by to deliver the paperwork spoke gently, explaining what it meant that Julia couldn't call text message or come near me or my family ever again. When he left, I remember standing by the window, watching the sunlight hit the edges of the document in my hands. It felt surreal, like a symbol of protection and grief all at once. I should have felt free, but all I felt was tired. Julia didn't show up again, at least not in person. But her silence online was short-lived. Within days, my grandparents told me something that made everything click into place. Julia's sister Amelia had reached out to them after 10 years of silence. At first, they ignored her calls, but she persisted, leaving voicemail after voicemail, begging for them to hear her out. Eventually, my grandfather answered, and what Amelia confessed left everyone speechless. She and Julia were broke. Their bakery, the one they'd poured everything into, had been bleeding money for months, rent overdue, suppliers unpaid, their bank accounts nearly empty. Julia had been desperate. Her reaching out to me, the crocodile tears, the sudden apology. None of it had been about love or guilt. It was about money. She wanted to use me to get back into the family's good graces, to reach the grandparents she and Amelia had betrayed, to win financial support under the disguise of reconciliation. Every word she'd spoken to me at that cafe had been part of a plan. Her trembling hands, her sobs, even the way she said she just wanted to fix things. It wasn't remorse, it was a strategy. When I heard that, my stomach turned. For a while, I couldn't even speak. I'd thought I'd run out of ways to be disappointed in her, but Julia always found one more. I sat with my adoptive parents that night, staring at the ceiling as we talked it through. My father said quietly, "People like her, they don't want forgiveness, Doris. They want leverage." He was right. Soon after news spread that Julia and Amelia had separated, their bakery closed down. Their home was listed for sale. And as much as I wanted to feel vindicated, I didn't. I just felt empty. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I just wished it hadn't taken so much damage to them, to me, to everyone, for the truth to finally surface. Sometimes when I walk past a cafe window, I still see her face in my mind. The way she looked at me that day, not like a mother seeing her daughter, but like a gambler watching her last card being taken away. In the end, Julia lost everything she tried to manipulate her way into keeping. Her family, her marriage, her reputation, and me. The day the final court document arrived confirming that the restraining order was permanent, I folded it carefully and placed it in a box, the same one where I'd kept the few photos from my childhood. Then I slid the box to the back of my closet. That night I sat by my window, watching the city lights blink in the distance. For the first time, the silence felt comforting. Elena knocked softly and peeked in. "You okay, sweetheart?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think I finally am." She came in and hugged me, not out of pity, but pride. "You did the right thing, Doris." And for once, I believed her. Now, as I pack for college, I keep thinking about how endings aren't always fireworks and tears. Sometimes they're just quiet acceptance the moment you stop expecting apologies and start choosing peace instead. I don't know where Julia is now. Maybe she's still trying to rebuild. Maybe she's telling herself a story where she's the victim again. But it doesn't matter anymore. Because for the first time since I was 7 years old, my life is mine. I walked out of that story the moment I stopped answering her messages, and I'm never walking back in.